How do you distinguish between the ego voice, the fear voice, and how do you distinguish between the intuitive voice? Intuition isn't always going to make sense, but also the intuitive message will come in, it will give you the message, and it will leave.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mark Groves podcast. Today I have Natalie Miles. Welcome to the show.
Hello. I'm excited to chat with you.
So for you listening, Natalie is an author, a channel, a psychic medium, an incredible human. And let's get into what is a channel, what is a psychic medium? Because I'm sure for some people are like, oh man, we're going off the deep end. Yes, let's go.
Yeah, so for me, I'm a psychic medium. I connect to the other side. I connect to your spirit team. So a team in spirit that you have that are around you to guide you and look after you, and share information with you. I connect to loved ones who have passed over. So deceased family members, friends, animals.
That's pretty cool.
And ancestors too. So ancestors, so ancestral lineage, ancestors that you may or may not know of that come through too. So yeah, that's what I do. And I channel information from them, and I channel kind of information on the collective. So the energy of what's happening in our collective, because there's a connection between what's happening to us individually on the micro and what's happening on the macro. And so, yeah, I get that information coming through too.
Well, there must be a lot of chatter in the last while about what's going on in the collective.
It's been rather loud. I did back in 2019 for the 2020 energy forecast that I did, because I do a yearly forecast. And what came through for 2020 was that there was going to be a global health crisis, and it was all going to be about our sovereignty around that. So that's what came through for 2020.
And you record those too, so it's not like that's not documented.
Yeah, it was all recorded. So during the last couple of years, people were very much like, this is what you said, this is what you shared. And also in 2019, there was also this energy of, what's the elephant in the room? Like, what is there something coming? Like, there is this pivotal thing there's an elephant in the room. There's something massive coming through that's going to change everything. And we've all got a bit comfortable. So hold on to your hats.
So 2019, 2020, certainly a doozy. 2021, buckle up, bitches, because that one went real wild. 2022, we were like coming out of the fog, I guess, a little bit. What is the forecast?
2023 is all about moving on. Like, the energy for 2023 is about moving on. And so we're really moving on. Jobs, careers, identity is a real big part of all of that, like shifting identities, how we communicate, but also this real energy of nourishment for 2023. Like, how are we nourishing ourselves? What does that mean to support ourselves, to support our bodies, to nourish ourselves in 2023 was really big. But also around moving on doesn't necessarily mean like creating a massive action plan and like focusing on outcomes and goals. It's actually kind of more internal as well, this energy of moving on, where there's a very subtle shift internally. Yeah, and also lots of people are going through really big crumblings and unravelings as part of that moving on energy, leaving jobs, changing careers, relationship endings, births, deaths, marriages, all of the above. It's like a real change for us in 2023.
When we look at that confrontation of death, that really COVID was, the pandemic was.
Yeah.
Do you think that's what is bringing about the crumbling away, that we've had to, confront? Well, some of us more than others had to like actually dealt with it, and others, because we left liquor stores open and closed gyms, which made a lot of sense. Then people just had more addictions. Certainly addictions have gone up. Mental health issues have gone up because we're not navigating the things we need to navigate. But do you think for the vast majority of people where things are crumbling away, it is
I
because they
think there's
are
an
confronting it?
energy of how what people have had to face over the last 2 years, they now actually have to take action on them. Again, they actually really have to face what is happening. We live in a death phobic culture. I've just started a podcast called Things That Die, talking about death specifically because, yes, off the back of the last couple of years where we've really seen the death phobic culture in action, but also because part of my channeling that's coming through is that we're going to be facing more death on this planet. So let's start talking about it. Let's start having the difficult conversations. Let's talk about endings because we're going to be facing more of it. So let's break the taboo on that conversation. But as part of, people are really facing difficult mental health issues. And I see that in my clients, but also people really wanting to make the changes in their lives. But what's really interesting, everyone's tired. Like people are tired. They're tired of, they want to make the changes, but they don't necessarily have the energy to do that. And I'm seeing that really on a macro level and on a micro level on, working with people where people really want to make the changes, but there's such a polarity of like one day having loads of energy to make the changes and really face the things and face the endings, and then the next day being really tired and be like, oh my God, I don't think I can face that. So yeah, it's a bit of a roller coaster right now.
Yeah, we seem to be in that time where we're like coming out of it and there's a birth. So there's the need for restoration, the need for taking care of ourselves. I think about the constant psychological stress that we've all endured. No matter, I think no one has been untouched by that. And that psychological stress is just, although I think, man, if you're going to become a channel, that's probably when it happens. What was the birth of your, or were you always chatting with squirrels and shit? Like, I'm curious. Yeah. You're always like, you're a little kid and spirit's like, hey, you should tell your mom this. And then all of a sudden your mom's like, how the hell do you know that?
I used to have really weird dreams as a kid. So I used to dream that I was like Mercury, like I was actually like a silver liquid and I could move myself into different times and spaces. And that used to be a really big recurring dream for me as a kid, which now looking back is a really psychic, intuitive dream. I also used to be very frustrated and angry as a kid, especially when I used to see wrongdoing or I used to see people lying around me, or I could tell when something was energetically off. So it meant that I used to get very frustrated and angry as a kid. But I started going to like psychic circles in the UK. So
how old were you?
Before I moved to Canada, and I'm back in the UK. But when I was 16, I went to psychic circles with my mom, which meant that I realized that I could share messages. And I was like, oh wow, like this is cool. And I really experienced the other side for the first time in a kind of more of a ritual, more of a structured format versus me getting messages or knowing things or being intuitive. So that was when I first really realized. And then I shut it down. Well, I didn't shut it down. It just wasn't formalized as a thing with my own gifts. But it wasn't until I moved to Canada and I left my friends, my family, and kind of stepped into a whole brand new country where I turned back to my own intuition. And I found a psychic circle and I found a mentor who said to me, Nat, you do know you're going to be doing this full time. And I laughed because I was working in film. I saw that as my career. And as that unraveled and that ended, and I realized that it didn't light me up, I was like, oh gosh, like I'm going to be like, I'm going to create a business and I'm going to do this. And it's been the best thing ever because it just feels like me. Me and the work are nothing separate. Like I am I get to share and I get to channel and I get to share messages with people. And that brings me a lot of joy. And I know it's my purpose. I know that's why I'm here on this planet.
So when you started to not access it, but I guess develop this skill set.
Yeah.
Were you kind of caught off guard by the messages you were getting? Like, what's kind of like the weirdest moment you got one and you're like, oh, I should go tell them. And then you did. And they were like, what the heck? Has that happened?
Yeah. When I was first giving messages, it was like really random things. Like I'd see cakes flying around people's heads and I was like, oh, like, why am I seeing cake? And then I'd say to the person like, oh, I'm seeing cake around you. You have a relationship to cake or sweet things. And the woman was like, oh, it's always been my dream to be a baker. It's always been my dream to have a bakery and I love sweet things. I was like, oh, cool. Like that was the first ever message I gave at 16. One funny message that always randomly stays with me is I was in a psychic circle in Vancouver and all I could hear was Super Mario music, like the actual video game. And I was like, why am I hearing this? This is this is weird. So I said to the woman and I said, look, I'm hearing this Mario music. I keep seeing you jumping over like the green tubes and you're trying to jump the boxes and you can't. And she laughed at me and she said, oh my gosh, she said, last weekend, I decided that I was going to practice Super Mario in secret behind my boyfriend's back so that I could get really good and then I could surprise him and he'd be like, why are you all of a sudden so good at Super Mario? And I was like, that's the most random message. And I was like, well, keep going because the other side think it's really cool that you're doing it. Otherwise I wouldn't be hearing the Super Mario music.
That is so funny.
So it can be really simple. Like messages can be really simple, but then you can also be sharing messages of go and reach out to that person because they might not be on this planet very much longer. Or, you know, your dog's in pain. Maybe it's time to help them to the other side. So you can get really simple, fun, playful messages, and then you can get the more hard-hitting mediumship messages where they're saying how they died, how they passed over, giving information to family members because there's been a question mark on how they died and you're filling in the blanks from speaking to the other side around like how someone passed over. So you get all range of the spectrum of like what kind of messages you're sharing. It's always really interesting.
How did you learn to trust that? Like, because I would imagine there's people listening who are like, I've always felt like an intuitive sense. So how do you know if what you're saying, the person listening is like, I think I might have? Like, what would be the signs and symptoms? And then how did you develop trust with that?
Great question. So we're all intuitive. For me, how I share it is it's beginning to notice the themes and the patterns and the signs around you, the imagery. So it's like all of a sudden you're getting those repeated words, repeated phrases. You know, you're overhearing conversations where you're hearing particular words keep coming up. Music, suddenly you're listening to certain music and it's playing through in lyrics. You're watching a TV show and suddenly they start using the word or the phrase and it's trying to get your attention. And sometimes that's how our intuitive gifts come through. It's about noticing the signs and messages. It's not necessarily, seeing it as like a psychic thing. But we do all have access to our feeling, hearing, knowing, and seeing gifts. And it's about seeing and playing, like literally playing with them. So I always say that noticing, like pausing and stopping and noticing is the way forward. Ironically, at the start of 2020, so many people were finding themselves to be way more intuitive because they had stopped, they had paused, they weren't in the usual craziness of life. And so their intuitive gifts actually like skyrocketed. Their dreams, their information, the dream state was coming through. So that's how I'd start beginning to notice, for people to notice. And on a trust level, I think it's about understanding what trust feels like in your body, because for many of us, we don't know what trust feels like in the body with what we've been through in our lives. But it's also I say start small. So start small in asking for a sign, asking for a message, and then get bigger. So I always say, as a really great example, like ask for the car parking space. Like actually, when you're driving up to somewhere really busy,
I do that.
Yeah,
Works.
It works.
All of a sudden you got baller parking. Someone pulls out, you pull right in. You're like, what's up?
Exactly. And I've had that in my, where I think that I've got the space. I'm like, yes. And my guides go, don't you trust us? Like, why don't you drive like that extra like 50 yards and just go to the front of the building? And I've done that and I'm like, oh, there's even more of a better space. Or someone like literally pulls out. And yeah, so start with the small things like car parking spaces and then build into it. But for me, it's part of trusting what feels off in the body. Like again, when especially if you're navigating through a situation, a relationship, a person, it's really about honoring how your body feels, because the body is intuitive, and it's an intuitive vessel. And when we honor that and we kind of be open to discover how that flows in, it's really potent.
One thing, and I think this is such an important question that I think almost everybody reaches at some point in their life, and it is the first time that what they've been taught and who they've been taught to be and who they've built themselves to be, like the way they present themselves to the world and how they want to be seen, is in opposition with that voice, with that intuitive feeling. Like I currently know, just off the top of my head, and this is not even thinking about people who message me on social media, 2 people who are feeling called to leave a relationship. The message is has been hitting them for more than a year, some 3 years. And they're doing all the research to try to figure out. The reason I know this is because I've done this, so I can see it now, because in hindsight, it's pretty clear. Mm-hmm. But it's like I was doing all the research to make it anything but what I knew, but what I felt. I wanted to figure out, why was I broken? What was wrong with me that I couldn't choose this? And that was true also in my relationship with Kylie. Like she felt like, why can't I choose this? And it became such a massive point of trust for both of us to trust the feeling to leave, which ironically brought us back. But I have had that feeling where I needed to leave something and couldn't make it make sense, and made the choice to trust that. And it was the birth of Create the Love. It was the birth of my passion for relationships. But I'm curious, for people who are navigating that, do you have any advice for them? Because I feel like that is like the fucking, and I'm sure if you're listening, you're like, please just let her fucking answer. Okay, so go.
In fact, I have a whole chapter on this in my book because it's such a big thing.
Huge.
Because how do you distinguish between the ego voice? How do you distinguish between the fear voice? And how do you distinguish between the intuitive voice? For me, I describe that intuition isn't always going to make sense. It's not going to make logical sense. It's going to be a particular heart feeling in the body that you're drawn to, but that also the intuitive message will come in. It will give you the message and it will leave. It will go. But the anxiety and the fear voice will come in and it will just keep going round and round and round in your head. And so that's a really great way of distinguishing between them. Also, the intuitive voice is more direct and more authoritative, and it will come in with a presence and an energy, versus your anxiety, running off at speed, feeling like, it's a sergeant barking orders at you. Like there's a completely different energy to it. And I also say that, oh man, when you're not listening to your intuitive voice, it is like the small pebble that turns into the rock, that turns into the large life boulder, where it's like, are you going to listen? And I've had that myself in relationships as well. When I haven't been listening to it, I know when I'm not listening, because houses get flooded. Multiple times have I had a house flooded.
Like your house gets flooded?
Yeah.
God, your guides are like, sorry, like you're going to have to leave because the house is getting flooded.
and also like cars driving through windows. Like if I couldn't, this
I'm
was
sorry, of a house?
yeah. So I was in
More
a
than once.
basement. I got flooded twice, two separate houses, and but same relationship. And the car was with the car was also this same person, and it was we were in a basement, and someone drove, basically mounted the curb and drove through this like massive glass window that you wouldn't have thought was like anything on street level, but was actually like the access point to the whole of this basement below it. So we were really worried that when we heard this massive bang that like literally woke us up from sleeping, and I smelt like the rubber, and I was like, "Oh shit, someone's dead in our living room! Like there's a car in our living room." But that was the beginning of the person was fine. They'd stolen the car, and by the time we'd got out, they'd run off. But that was the ending of the like the real ending of the relationship.
I love how
Which
your
then,
guides got that guy to steal a car to drive him into your house. Like of all the houses, you're like 2 floods. I'm gonna stay. This is great. This relationship. The fucking car. Did you listen after the car?
Oh yes, yeah. That was like the biggest, literally wake up call. Like the biggest wake up call.
Yeah,
on
good call.
all levels of what are you doing? Which led me to leaving the UK, coming to Vancouver, leaving film, doing what I'm doing now. Like that wouldn't have happened without. But I wasn't listening to my intuition.
This episode was brought to you by The Wellness Company. Now, you guys know I'm all about standing in the truth of what matters to me. And when it comes to my health and my family's health, I am very careful who I take advice from. Trust and transparency are so important to me, especially now that I'm a new dad. Now, The Wellness Company was formed by a team of doctors who lost their jobs, and they were subsequently canceled, censored, for speaking up and pushing back against the mismanagement of the pandemic. As a native Canadian and former pharmaceutical rep, I am all too familiar with the failings of the current system, and it is pretty clear that we need some sort of massive change. Now, not only does the Wellness Company offer live telemedicine services, but they also have a wide range of high-quality, doctor-formulated supplements that are designed to, 1, degrade the spike protein and protect you from shedding, boost your immune system, support your heart health, help you sleep better, and there's so many more. They recently just launched the Spike Support Formula. Now, it's the only product I've seen that contains a unique combination of natural ingredients, including nattokinase and dandelion root extract. Nattokinase has been shown to help break down and eliminate the spike protein, and dandelion root blocks it from binding to your cells. To support those experiencing side effects from the shots, and to help those suffering from long COVID, and to protect you from shedding, the Spike Support is one supplement that everyone can benefit from in this post-pandemic world. The truth is that we all need to be taking steps to protect ourselves from that toxic spike protein. Get yourself the Wellness Company's Spike Support Formula now. You can go to twc.health/Groves and use the code GROVES at checkout to save 15% off. So that's twc.health/Groves to save 15%. Yeah, the magic of, I think of it like, after hearing, I was talking to you yesterday about Carolyn Mace, just as she says, like, when you don't choose that, you're not trusting the hand of God that's leading you. You're saying, I know better. And gosh, that actually seems to be kind of normal, right? Like it's normal to not listen to the intuitive sense because, look, we can monetize that. We can monetize self-abandonment. It's great. You can pick up addictions. But when you're like in the vibe, when you're like in alignment and you're working out and you're eating nutritious foods, like we all know what decisions are pro-life and what decisions are pro-death. And, it's about eradicating the pro-death ones, which means that you're actually celebrating life, vitality, and you're saying, I'm here for a reason. And man, I'm not spouting from the rooftops here or from the clouds being like, just do it. Because I certainly have resisted like fuck for the last 3 years, been like, oh no, I got to keep doing this. I got to stay the same. It's too risky to be loud. It's too risky to share opposing feelings, but realizing that the risk actually is much greater staying the same in my experience.
Yeah, very much. And then the impact that that has on the body and on your throat and your throat chakra and all
Your
the
thyroid, yeah.
it's the energy of the line between the throat and the heart space is massive. Like, it's such a potent portal, and so many just people struggle with their voice. That's one of the biggest things that comes up in sessions is people really knowing what they want to say but not saying it, people knowing what they want to express in relationships but not saying it. No, like, the sessions that I always find are really interesting. In the end, I'm giving information that people know, but they actually just need to hear from someone who doesn't know them, who's literally channeling through what wants to happen, so that they can see the choices. I'm not here to tell someone what to do. It's like, this is what's in front of you. But also, I think people lose scope sometimes of, they show me like the timeline. So they'll be like, this happened when you were 15, this when happened when you were 22, so that people can see the repetitive pattern that we're repeating, because we forget that we're just sometimes on these loops that we don't end off, that we don't complete. And so when we see the repetitive pattern in our own life, but then we also see that as an ancestral loop, because then they're like, ancestors will come through in a session and they're like, oh, we did this too. Oh yeah, this was our problem too.
Oddly relieving, You're like, wait, so I am the first one entrusted with the possibility of ending this loop. And I think that's the beautiful thing about being able to have the awareness, the tools, the gifts, the whatever, support, community, guide that says, actually, you don't have to do this again.
Yeah.
Because, man, and then you become the first person in your lineage who's, since that behavior has begun, to move through it. And that's why I think what's so powerful about, let's say, setting a boundary or leaving a relationship or starting one, finally opening up to love, is people will say, well, why is it so hard? All I need to do is say, like, no, I don't want to go to the movie, or no, I don't, whatever. And I'm like, because it's so much greater. Like, you have a whole cellular DNA construct that remembers that the last time someone truly stood in their power, they might have died. They might have been raped. They might have been, assaulted, sent to jail, whatever it might be. And it's like, that's so much to stand up against, because you're not just standing up against, I don't want to go to dinner this evening. It seems so trite, but it's not.
No, not at all. And it can also be something as simple as, like, you've overheard something as a child, like you've overheard a conversation, or you've promised yourself something as a kid where you're like, oh, I'm not going to do it that way. Or you've seen something mirrored back to you, or a friend has said something, or something happens at school. It's always really interesting, the information that comes through of our school experiences and our schooling experiences, and the connection to friendships, and how that those first school friendships, those friendships that you have in the playground, really shape your romantic partnerships, of how you interact and how you set boundaries. And I took that for granted as a kid. Like, you don't realize that, but on reflection back, and what's come through in client sessions, is those childhood friendships inform so much about ourselves.
Yeah, the beliefs we create about ourselves, the vulnerabilities, the wounding, the betrayals, the rejections. It is, it's painfully fascinating to me that, we have, let's say, one major rejection or betrayal, maybe numerous, but it only takes one.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, we make every connection mean it's going to lead to that wound, that injury. And as you were saying, that actually can be ancestral. Yeah. But the way it's passed down is through the behavior patterns of our parents, because they keep hitting the same upper limit. It makes me think of, like, I think it was rats that were exposed to a smell and shocked. And then the next generation, the rats were never shocked with the smell. They just inherited the protective mechanism to not, when they smell that smell, to avoid it. And so it took 3 generations for that to leave. And I think, like, wow, we actually have the ability to see decouple the connection from injury or the connection from absence of required behavior that we now can say, oh, I actually need boundaries. I actually need a voice. I actually need to say no. I actually need to say yes, like whatever it is.
Yeah. And also, I find it really interesting because of globalization and people moving around countries, especially, people coming to America, people moving to different parts of the world, that also having a real impact on people on safety in the body, because ancestrally their ancestors moved around or their ancestors were displaced because of war or violence, and how that then impacts, this generation where they're wondering why they don't feel settled, or they wonder why they can't create a home, or they wonder why they can't feel rooted. And then the ancestors come through and they're like, well, hi, like, you forgot about our experiences, and again, as an invitation and an opportunity to see those feelings in the body and to heal them, and finally be like, okay, I'm going to make roots. I'm going to anchor. I'm going to see how this shows up in my body and create the home for the family is really, really big.
Yeah, I can see that. I remember being at a talk in Vancouver where the speaker was saying what happens to a lot of people who move to, let's say, Canada or the US, and were, inheriting the sort of the colonization, is there's not a belief that they're indigenous from somewhere. Like they're disconnected from that. And I thought, oh, that's actually quite interesting that we forget. That's the wounding of the trauma of colonization also occurs to the people who left their land.
Yeah.
But we forget that.
Big time. And it's a forgetting of ancestral rituals, ancestral food, and just an energy connection to a land that feels familiar in some way, and on an energetic level. But it's such a big invitation right now to find that connection, but also it is an invitation into that ancestral energy to see where we're not being authentic based on previous ancestral stories. Money's really, money and ancestor stories is huge.
Oh my God, massive.
Like families who have lost money in the past, lost land, had money and then lost it, or it always comes through in sessions around that connection. So if someone's listening to this and is just like, what is going on with my money? I'm struggling with money. Like, go back and look at what you know about your direct family, like your living family around money and their relationship to money. But really, like, go and ask the stories of your grandparents and your great grandparents, if you can, around what their money story, like what their relationship to money was, or was there loss of money in the family, because it normally stems back from there too.
Wow. Okay, I'm curious, when you talk to somebody, are their guides all hanging out behind them or like in the sky around you? And they're
I
like,
love that question.
Is that true? Like, is that what happens?
Yeah, like I see it as it's like my spirit team. So my guides, like having a chat with their spirit team all around, who are like all stood around them. And I'm like I'm literally just the radio wave frequency in the middle. I'm like just the door that allows.
You're like the fly on the wall that we all wish we were for conversations. You're like that, but you're like in another realm, like.
Yeah, I find it. Yeah, I'm just tuning into the right frequency. I'm just the radio, so that they can communicate, and then I can pass the info on.
Today's podcast is sponsored by NutriSense. That was the sound of the NutriSense biosensor that I've been wearing, because as you know, I've been diving deep into how my body works. I've been doing what I would like to call Operation Reverse Dad Bod, to step out of the narrative that fathers become less fit when they become fathers. And I wanted to use this special moment of being a father to get into the best shape of my life. And this is part of that journey. So it's this small device that you put on the back of your arm that provides real-time feedback on how your body responds to the foods that you're eating, your exercise, stress, and even your sleep. Now, it's not just for diabetics, it's for anybody looking to take charge of their blood sugar and their metabolic health, which is exactly me and might be you. With NutriSense, you're not just guessing how choices may impact your blood sugar, your metabolic health. NutriSense helps you track your data. It helps you understand your glucose trends, and you get to see your macronutrient breakdown for each meal.
The app gives you an overall score for each meal based on how your body responds. Now you can literally see how food and habits are affecting your metabolism. It's amazing. I love it. And what's incredible is that you don't have to figure it all out by yourself, because one of my favorite parts of NutriSense was that I was matched with a personal nutritionist to get one-on-one insights. Now she helped me understand so much about blood sugar, how what I was eating was impacting it, and honestly so much more. And I have to add, she was actually incredibly funny, which made it even better. She also helped me create a personalized plan, and she would check in on me regularly just to make sure that I was keeping on track. Honestly, I would recommend everyone try NutriSense. When you use it for a month, it opens your eyes in profound ways for how your food, your exercise, and everything you're doing is affecting you. You can get all of this today. NutriSense has a special offer for our listeners. Go to nutrisense.com/markgroves and use the code markgroves to save $50 off your first month, plus get a free month of nutritionist support. Be sure to tell them that you learned about NutriSense on the Mark Groves podcast. So go visit nutrisense.com/markgroves and use code markgroves to start decoding your body's messages and pave the way for a healthier life.
Okay, I'm curious. Can you chat with mine? Are mine hanging out?
Well,
mine are probably chatty. I think that's true. It's likely.
Yeah, they probably don't stop talking, Mark.
No. Yeah, yesterday you gave a message. We recorded on Natalie's podcast yesterday, and my dog was barking, so I had to go just get him to be quiet for the podcast. And she was like, actually, he wanted me to tell you that he doesn't like his sleeping arrangements. And I was like, that's really funny, because we didn't have him for the first 4 months of Jasper's life, just newborn. It was just easier, and he was with my parents and their dog. And I got him back, and he was sleeping in my room right now. He was sleeping in the room with me. And he told Natalie, which so funny is the night before you and I chatted, I had this sense like, I need to move him downstairs to the basement so he has his own space in the kennel. And you were like, he doesn't like,
yeah, I was
I
like,
thought he would have wanted to chill, but he didn't. He was like,
yeah. He was like, I don't want to be there anymore. I need my space. I feel I don't have, he's like, I'm really uncertain where I'm sleeping. I don't know where I belong. Where shall I be? I need my space. Yeah.
That makes sense. A little stability. He's had a little movement.
Yeah. And also he wants to be part of the pack, but also wants like his space that he knows that, you know, that's his space that he can call his. There's something really important for that as he kind of re-finds his place. Carl finds his space in the pack again.
Yeah, he's back in the pack with Jasper. Is he above Jasper or below? I think they're hanging out together. He's pretty good. When I introduced them, he was like, okay, cool. I have a brother. That's cool. Can we go play fetch? Like, it was pretty.
Carl's got great energy. Like he's just,
oh my God, he's the best.
He's just awesome. I love that dog. He's calm, he's collected. He's so family orientated. He's just so happy to be part of a family. Like that is his thing. Like he is like just so happy to be, you know, in family. And so I know you got him. There was something like you got him when you were in your break, right? Like
yeah.
Yeah. So when Kai it was suddenly like, oh yes, like this is awesome.
Like, sweet, I got a mom now. That's nice. Yeah. Yeah. Nice to have a little feminine energy around here. Some candles.
Big time. Your guides and your ancestors right now are really, they're just geeing you on to the next level. There's a big upgrade. There's a big shift that fatherhood has really like rooted and anchored you in a whole different way that now actually gives you permission to like go to the actual heights that you have, how you can show up, where there is like a deeper presence and a deeper reverence for family, but that actually now kind of gives you permission to go and really follow the dreams and really go and speak about the subjects that you really want to go and talk about. And this like reassignment of like who Mark is like really potent.
Yeah, I freaking felt that. That's no doubt. It was like, man, sorry, you don't have a choice. Sorry, you don't have a choice. I remember you saying during 2021, I think it was, maybe 2022, because you came and visited when we were in Calgary.
Yeah, it was 2021.
Yeah, and I remember you were like, sorry, you've been reassigned. And I was like, no, I get it. I can feel it. Ironically, though, it's like the exploration of how humans interact is not limited to romantic relationships. It's just a great way to amplify what are the things that we're going through.
Yeah.
But, exploring the human condition and what I think, especially right now, what's so interesting, I'm curious your thoughts on it and what the sort of collective and macro and micro message is. But what I witness is that there seems to be a real great fear of being with the truth, being with reality, being with, like, we were having these conversations, let's say, for example, about gender, and we're unwilling to say that sex exists, biological sex exists, and there's just no conversation about it. It's like, if you want to converse about it, you're phobic. And, you look at the conversation about vaccines, it was like, wait, you're criticizing it? You're anti. And to me, that's just not a healthy way of operating any society, culture, family relationship. Because if you came to me with a concern about a birth control pill and I called you anti-birth control, that'd be pretty stupid. I should be celebrating your level of curiosity. But I think, again, it's that correlation to death. I'm so convinced that if you don't do this thing, even though it doesn't make scientific or critical thinking sense, it's emotional now. I'm going to have to villainize you so that I feel safer, even though it's actually a false sense of safety. It's not real.
Yeah. And I think it's really connected to, we are in a time of when people are being taken out of their power. So the ways that we can create division, the ways that we can get us to turn upon each other is all part of this. 2026, 2027 is really big for the collective on the truth being the real truth around society and governments and money and the political systems really coming to a head. But
we gotta wait till 2026. Shit.
Yeah, there's more. 2026, 2027 just feels really, really big on the planet. And I think that the discussions that we're having of looking at what truth is part of that, where we are being distracted, fragmented in all the ways, so that we don't want to have the difficult conversations, but that also it is to create, as you say, and together and having the conversation. It's like, well, you're in that camp and you're in this camp and you don't believe this, so we're over here. It is creating that warring, fractious energy that is and it wants it. The energy wants that. That's why it's like, when we can have those conversations and step out of the warringness of it, is big, because that's what it wants us to do. That's how but truth and the rise of the things that are hidden in the shadows, and the peak of 2026, 2027 just feels really big.
Yeah, it's interesting how there's a war on information now.
Yeah.
And the language that's used about that, because a lot of things, a large amount of things that were labeled misinformation were actually not, and have been proven as such. And the quote unquote fact checkers were often full of shite. So, I look at even how the word freedom, and I refuse to be put in boxes of left or right, because as soon as someone says, when I want to have a discussion, that I must be right wing, I just refuse to join those labels, because it's not an accurate label of me. Yep. But left wing is no longer an accurate label of me. Yep. And it's just a trap. It's a fucking trap.
It is.
And they call it the left and right wing belong to the same bird. Horseshoe politics, talks about how the left and right at their extremes become the same. And, it's, if we don't buy into it and we continue to actually have and learn how to have dialogue, but this to me is such a sign of our inability to do that romantically, our inability to do that, right? It's just a macro of the micro. None is not fair. A lot of us have not sat with our shit, and we haven't healed our childhood shit. And because of that, we are unable to sit with the divisions we're split, so we embrace what is split in the macro, and it's because both force us within, and spirit
Completely.
is like, yo, like, get on a ride. Like, you can either deal with this and eat the dark night of the soul humble pie, or
completely
feed the darkness, I guess.
Because we feel then we have to split ourselves to then cope with what's happening on the external. So we then end up it creates a vicious circle where we're just then fueling what's happening on the micro by continually splitting ourselves and stepping us out of our truth, which is why connecting to your intuition of what feels right for you at this time and really dropping in and being open to that and pausing and noticing and really honoring the intuitive body and how it's communicating for you, that is what's going to help you navigate these times. Like that's what is, the more that you strengthen your own gifts, your own intuition of what is your truth and what feels right and wrong for you, job done. Like, because if you're doing that and then you're showing that to your friends, your family members, your community, that then ripples out, and then it has really powerful energetics of using your voice and listening to your intuition of what do you believe, what's your truth, and also what's your truth, but also digging deep into what, inverted commas, the truth is being told at you.
Well, at this point, it seems like the weaponization or amplification of shame and the threat of not belonging is so high. And, that being from cancel culture, but it's also within families. You have an opposing view, you're not invited to Christmas. You think this, oh, you're this. And, what sort of advice do you have as we face, because it's a very real reality for humans to face what is possibly the disintegration or the rejection of connection in order to embrace what intuition is saying? And I think we've all been put in some level of that in the last 3 years, for some way before that. But, I think for the collective, it's really been a compression of like, will you use your voice or will you not? And I don't think it's ever too late or too, there's no shame holding on too longer or, any of that.
Ironically, I think it's community that's going to rebuild and for us to help develop our own intuition. I think community is the key, and it's not about the self, it's actually about the people around us. And that's where many of us are really being guided to right now, is to reestablish and root down into a community. But at the same time, it's about community, but not in an echo chamber. Otherwise, if we're just creating community and echo chamber, that's like we're just repeating the same shit over again. So I think it's the community that can listen to what it knows intuitively, but is ready to open to have the debate and to connect with other communities that might have differing beliefs. But do you know what I mean? But to mingle within.
Yeah, it's
that.
interesting. That's a really good point, because you end up experiencing possibly the severance of connection with, or the destabilization of connection that is actually rooted on you not being honest or being truthful or being authentic. And so the system has to reorganize around the real you. This is true of romantic relationships. When you start expressing yourself, family with your mom, all of a sudden you got boundaries in a boundaryless system. The system, everyone has to take on a new role, one that respects boundaries, one that respects wholeness. And you're right, all of a sudden you are now free, but it doesn't feel like freedom. But you're free, you're liberated from the pattern, and you are now a full self, free from these codependent patterns. And now you are drawn to community of other people who celebrate unconditionally your expression. That's certainly been my experience. And I was thinking the other day, like, no one codependent has ever created anything that is novel and unique that threatened their connections and the opinions of the people around them, the feelings. And when we finally step into the gift, the calling, the thing, and experience being free from that prison that we agreed to be part of, we now are free to find other people who are following their gifts. Because if you came to me and you're like, I have a dream, I'm like, that sounds great, which I know that's a famous speech, but it's like, if you came to me and you said that, my response would immediately be, tell me more about your dream. Not, oh, have you thought about like the algorithm? Have you thought about like what your dad will think? It's like, let's fucking light this up.
Yeah. And getting that excitement and the fire. And one of the main messages that Spirit always gives me is, will you just lighten up and go and have some fun? Like, you guys are so fucking serious. Like, what are you doing? Like, it's so loud. And, ancestors, loved ones, they're very much like, can you just move on from this and like go and enjoy yourselves? Because you guys are like really overanalyzing. Just go do what you love and stop taking everything so serious.
That's so good. I'm curious, what are you feeling called that people need to hear who are listening to this?
It's a really powerful, potent time of endings. Like, it really is. And so endings are uncomfortable. They bring up a lot from the past. They bring up a lot of the fear of the unknown and what the future is. And there very much is this bardo liminal space where we're in between things currently. And so if you're feeling that, one, know that you're not alone, know that it's happening in the collective, know that that's happening to lots of people. But this is a real time to honor the endings and shut the door on something. Don't leave it open, just a little crack, just in case that you can go back and, oh, well, you never know, they might change, or, that it might be for me, it might come back around again. If your intuition is telling you, shut the door, do it properly and walk away, listen and do it. It's a really potent time to do that. So if you're being invited in to do it, make it happen and listen.
Oh, that's so powerful. And I know that you listening are like, shit, because there's something. There's something. Maybe it's a behavior that's destructive. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's just a way of being. Maybe it's the way that you orient to food or your body or your work or your passions or your purpose or your heart or your intuition or all of it. So, Natalie Miles, this was, I'm going to say, savage. It was good. You fire.
Oh, thanks, Mark.
There's going to be some endings coming. You're going to be getting some messages like, burn that down. All right. All right. I appreciate you so much. For people listening, where can they find more of you? Where can they get your book? Yeah. All that stuff. And we'll make sure we link it all in the show notes.
Yeah. Website, natalie-miles.com, Instagram, I am Natalie Miles, and my book, You Are Intuitive, Trust Your Truth, Take Back Your Power.
So potent. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.